I want to thank Al, first of all, for the perfect setup, showing you how effective IP geophysics can be in target delineation and discovery, because that's going to be a big part of my presentation here as we talk through the Precipitate story. Forward-looking statement, obviously do your due diligence. Corporate highlights for the company. We have 3 highly prospective gold and copper projects in the Dominican Republic. They're all owned 100%, no underlying option payments or work commitments. I'm going to talk today about 2 of the 3 projects. The Wanda Herrera project, first of all, which is, some of you may know, is adjacent to Gold Quest Mining's Romero project, which is about a 3.5 million ounce gold equivalent project that we're adjacent to. The second project is immediately adjacent to Barrick's Pueblo Viejo mine, which is in the central part of the country and is one of Latin America's largest gold mines, producing somewhere in the ballpark of 600,000 ounces last year. We've got a working capital of about $9.5 million. As I mentioned, no debt and no underlying property payments, so discretionary funds. We recently closed, as Eric mentioned, a $6.5 million private placement that was led primarily by very strategic, very influential Dominican wealth that came in and took the majority of that. We've advanced both projects to a point where we've got multiple drill-ready targets across the portfolio, and we plan to initiate and conduct an extensive program of drilling through most of 2026. A quick snapshot here of the corporate structure or the capital structure. You can see we've got about 189 million shares issued and outstanding, 230 fully diluted. The only warrants out on the company are one set that came from the last financing. Prior to that, thanks to some transactions we had done, we hadn't had to do a private placement or an equity raise for 5 years, so there's no long outstanding warrants outstanding. Market cap's about $85 million. Working capital, as I said, is about $9.5 million, and some of the significant shareholders include Barrick Mining, a company called Strategic Metals out of Vancouver, and these new Dominican institutional investors who are in for about 20% of the shares. You can see on the chart, we've had a fairly compelling last couple of months, not only in terms of the share price appreciation, but also in volume. We've traded somewhere in the ballpark of about 2 million shares, 1.5 million, 2 million shares a day for the better part of 2 months. So good liquidity, good share price appreciation, and in our view, we're still just getting started. So this is where we are. The 3 projects are the 3 red dots you can see in the Dominican Republic. For those that don't know, the Dominican Republic is pretty closely proximal to mainland North America. It's just 1,500 kilometers away from Florida. And we've got 3 projects, and I'm going to talk about the Wanda Herrera first, and then I'll follow up with some information on the Pueblo Grande, which is next to Barrick. So this is our land package in gold or yellow. Gold Quest and their 3.5 million ounces is in gray. The Romero deposit is hosted up in the northern part of the project where you see those 2 stars. As I said, they've got about 3.5 million ounces there. The lighter blue dots on their property package indicate exploration targets or showings that they plan to follow up. On our project, the darker red dots are the more advanced targets on our property that have been delineated through primarily prospecting, sampling, mapping, but also some geophysics. And the lighter colored, more pink dots are sort of secondary assets. So what you can see here is a significant number of targets that have been developed and advanced over the course of several years, sort of waiting for a point in time when the market conditions were right and the permitting situation was right, where it makes sense to start to get much more aggressive with things like drill programs. So how do you take all those targets and narrow down and identify where do you want to go first, or what's your best chance at discovery? And the best way to do that, in our opinion, is to use a precedent that's been successful elsewhere in the same geological belt. So I'm using 3 examples here. Romero's Gold Quest, Romero's Cachimbo, which is a relatively new discovery on Gold Quest ground next to us, and a project called Candalones, which is a Unigold project a little further up north, but all in the same Terreo gold belt and the same geological terrain. And what the main takeaway here is, as you're looking at these plan maps, is you're looking at gold and copper at surface in the geochemistry, and that's indicated by the dots in each of those maps, combined with high chargeability beneath those surface geochem anomalies. And if you could find those 2 things coincidental in the same place, that's where you want to go hunting. So what did we do? Looking on the left side, you can see this is the property package, and it shows a number of, in fact, it's about 17,000 individual soil samples that we took from throughout the property package. And all those red dots on that map are samples that ran in the 80th percentile in gold. So clusters of elevated gold anomalies throughout the property package. So the next step was to go back to those same areas, go to those same anomalous zones where we're seeing the gold and copper at surface, and run lines of IP and see whether or not we can see those chargeability signatures that we're looking for and that we've seen elsewhere in the belt. And as you can see from the map here, there are several areas within our property package where we see these high chargeabilities in this sort of pink or purple or magenta color, situated right where we see the concentrations of gold and copper at silver. So that for us was the mechanism or the tool to do a deeper dive into each of those. And so what I'd like to do is just highlight three of them here. I'm going to start with our Ginger Ridge, which is in the central portion of the property package. Move on to the southern part here where we've got our southeast and centro zone. And finally, the Inebre and Peak zones where we've most recently delineated a new chargeability anomaly. It gets a little bit technical here and a little bit messy, but the real takeaway, again, as I said, is you want to see geochem at surface. And in the central map there, that's the white outline that shows the anomaly of gold at surface at our Ginger Ridge zone. Underneath that, you can clearly see the pink or the magenta color directly underneath it, which is exactly what we want to see. Now, if we look at those individual black lines, those are the survey lines that we've conducted in sort of a northwest trending direction. And if you were to look at those as if they're slices of bread in a loaf and pull them out one at a time, you get these sections that we have here on the side. And as you can see, we've taken away the noise, we've taken away the blues and the yellows and the greens, and really just focused in on where are the highest chargeability readings within each of these line sections. And you can see within each line, there are a number of very high chargeability anomalies, almost like clusters or fingers sitting below surface. All of these are all within about 350, 400 meters from surface, so we would consider those to be quite shallow. And there's been a modest amount of drilling in this area, but none of the drill holes that were conducted in this intersected any of the high chargeability anomalies. And part of the reason for that is we did the chargeability survey after the drilling. So we're able to go back, look now, and see how we might drill these differently. And this will be an area that we drill this year. And that strikes about 1.5 kilometers from tip to tail here. So there's a lot of hunting ground and maybe about 0.5 kilometer in width. The other thing about that zone is it is located proximal to that gold quest discovery called Cochimbo, which is essentially right across the claim boundary from this zone. Moving a little bit further south on the property package, as you see from the inset map here, this is our southeast and central zone. Again, repeating myself a little bit here, the black dashed line is the geochemistry at surface where we're seeing elevated gold and silver. And in both instances, there's two of them on this map are situated, coincidental with the high chargeability readings that we're looking for. There's a little bit more detailed geochem here in that we've got two trenches that were conducted there. Those are those yellow stars. And you can see the values that we return from the trenching. We're getting some quite elevated copper down here in this area that, again, give us some good conviction that there's something seriously going on here with respect to geochem, and now geophysics have supported that. Again, looking at the sections, looking in a northwest direction from the bottom end of the survey to the top, you can see the section lines. Again, we see these very strong anomalies, high chargeability readings in clusters all the way along the grid. And again, none of these areas have ever been drilled before. And again, you're looking at about 1.6 kilometers in strike of hunting ground here of the right kinds of signatures. And then lastly, of the ones I want to talk about down here, we've got our most recent survey, which is the Inebre South and Peak zones. In fact, these were two separate zones before we did this survey. We connected them through running some lines in between, and we've now got one sizable new geophysical anomaly that, again, has the right kind of copper and gold signatures at surface. And again, when we look at those section lines, looking in a northwest direction, again, you see these quite sizable, strong chargeability readings all the way along for the better part of 1 kilometer of strike. And again, relatively shallow. You're looking at a little over 300 meters in depth. So again, we would consider these to be relatively shallow targets, and never been drilled. Never had a drill hole anywhere in these regions. So we've outlined a number of targets. I've talked about some of them here, and that includes an additional zone here up in the north part called the CN zone, where we've got some quite elevated gold grades up in the 78 grams per ton gold sort of range. So we've got multiple targets. We've done extensive geochemical surveying. We've done extensive IP surveying. We've now delineated a number of untested targets, sizable targets. And the plan here for Juan de Herrera is to conduct a significant exploration drilling program through, as I mentioned earlier, the majority of 2026. Somewhere in the ballpark of 8,000 to 10,000 meters of drilling is planned. Had we talked about this and done this presentation about a month ago, that would have probably been the end of my presentation. But in the last month, a new sort of development has transpired, whereby on one of our secondary assets, the Pueblo Grande project, where Barrick had an earn-in agreement on this project with the right to earn 70%. They spent $7 million US over 5 years, included about 22 drill holes. They gave the project back to us last April. In most instances, as a junior that options a project or does an earn-in with someone and the major spends a bunch of money and gives it back, you think, well, that's the end of it. So we were quite content with that. But we were obligated to go through the data and look at what Barrick had done and perhaps what they hadn't done. And after about a 6-month process of going through that data, we identified what looked to be an underappreciated or perhaps unseen, again, IP geophysical anomaly that was never tested. So about a month ago, we announced that we had identified this anomaly at surface. This is Barrick's world-class Pueblo Viejo mine. As I said before, it's one of the largest gold mines in North America. Produces about 600,000 ounces last year. This is the claim boundary. So on this side is Barrick, on this side is Precipitate. You can see there's been a number of historic drill holes here. And in fact, this used to be part of our land package, but we gave that up to Barrick for a $5 million cash payment. They needed it for infrastructure, knowing that there was no mineralization there. But this new anomaly that we hypothesized was over on this side of the claim boundary, where there had never been any significant drilling into this. So we ran 3 lines of IP geophysics, once again, the same tool we've used at Juan de Herrera. And lo and behold, the red lines are the survey lines. The yellow is where we see the high chargeability. And again, looking at the sections, if you were looking from the east to the west, you can see quite significant high chargeability anomalies situated almost, right across the claim boundary, about a pitching wedge away from one of the largest gold mines in the world. And most importantly to us, never had a drill hole put through any of these high chargeability anomalies. And again, relatively shallow, from about 100 meters below surface down to about 330. And you've got an area here of about 800 meters north-south by about 400 meters east-west. And this anomaly is open in both directions, east and west. And so our plan here is to go in and test this target with a first phase of drilling expected to start shortly. In fact, about half an hour ago, we reported in a news release that we had signed a drill contract to commence a drill program at that target. We're fully permitted for drilling there. We've got a drill contract signed, as I said. We've completed access roads to get in. We've constructing drill pads, which should be finished in the coming week or two. We've secured a drill rig and a drill crew that are available and in country. I'm not waiting for them to come off of another job. And the expectation is we'll put out an announcement in the next week or two about the commencement of drilling, somewhere in the ballpark of a couple of thousand meters to begin with, maybe 3 or 4 holes, and we'll see what kind of joy we get. Again, this is geophysics. All the science lines up. Whether or not there's gold or copper there, that's yet to be determined by the drilling. So in summary, for Precipitate, we're poised for discovery in 2026. We're well financed with $9.5 million in the bank. We've completed systematic drill target delineation. We've got multiple advanced stage targets defined on 2 different properties. Drill preparations are now underway at Pueblo Grande, and we're planning to drill up to 10,000 meters at a minimum for 2026, with that expected to start as soon as next week or the week after. And that's my time. Thank you.